Hey everyone, welcome back. I hope you're having a great day. In this video, we're going to be going over two things. One, we're going to talk a little bit about how I'm making this portrait as I usually do in these videos. And two, I asked you guys in the previous video to leave some questions if you have any, and some of you have, so we're going to be discussing some of those today. I'm really excited to get to some of those questions, but if you don't mind, before we begin, please give this video a like and subscribe. That would help me out a lot. And now let's get started. So as you can see, I'm really starting by laying out these larger masses. So I'm laying down paint sort of into shapes, but really looking at the subtleties within the midtone. So there aren't any harsh darks or harsh lights just yet that I'm introducing. So right now I'm just focusing on these two different midtones, maybe three different midtones, that one's a little lighter, one's a little darker, but it'll start to give this portrait some volume. And feel free to look back at some of my previous videos, but you can see that I always start a painting with a sketch, whether it's in pencil like in this one, or sometimes I just start straight off the bat with acrylic and kind of give it a wash and indicate what the proportions are going to be when I really start laying this paint down during this process that I'm doing right now. All right, so now I think it's a good time to start looking at some of those questions. We're going to start with just one and then I'll get back into the painting. All right, so here we go. Amazing question. How do you keep your paint fresh when painting? I never pre-mix my colors, but only from a fear of them drying out. It would be easier to plan out the painting by pre-mixing though. Also, excellent mixing job. First, thank you for your question. And I know this is usually a nightmare when it comes to working in acrylic. And there is something that I have figured works pretty well, especially when I'm working in acrylic. And I know I'm going to be using this paint not just for 30 minutes to an hour, but I know I'm going to be sitting down and working in acrylic for about 2 or 3 hours. So here we go. The simplest thing that I found is just to get a spray bottle and fill it up with water and spray your mixed paints every 10 to 20 minutes. And you know, it's kind of a hassle to have to keep remembering to spray your palette, but I truly haven't found many better solutions. I've tried other mediums that say they're supposed to make the paint stay wet longer, and it's not really as effective as just making sure that that outside edge of the paint that you're using stays moist, because that is what happens. It kind of becomes a hard shell and then it's not really usable anymore. So just make sure that you remind yourself to continue spraying your palette every 10 to 20 minutes. And even though it's a hassle, it is just one of the things that comes to working with acrylics. So I hope I addressed your question. We're going to be doing one more question, but before that, let's get back to looking at the painting. So throughout this time, I've been working on really making these values be, let's say, interesting. So you're starting to see that I have some really dark browns, really dark reds, two reds and oranges, and some even orange yellows to yellows and lighter pinks too. So I'm not just going based off of one color and going up and down in value. I'm mixing different colors, and I feel that makes the portrait a lot more interesting and makes it come to life a lot more. And that's one of the things that I've enjoyed most about studying art, whether it's old masters or contemporary artists. It's really interesting to see their painting language and the decisions that they make on the canvas, how they communicate and what they're telling us. Along the process, I like to change up the different paintbrushes that I'm using. So in the beginning, I was more so using a larger brush just to fill up those masses and those larger blocks of color. And then I grab a smaller brush and start working on some of those details. Okay, now let's take a look at the second question. It goes, I'm having trouble blending colors and mixing the right skin tones and undertones. I now use a gray palette like you suggested. I'm currently teaching myself to paint and your videos have been very helpful. Thanks. First, thank you for the kind words. I really don't want to assume that it's because of this, but you know, there isn't a bunch of content of paintings of black and brown people on YouTube. And I kind of just want to do my part and add value to you guys, for those who are looking for this kind of content. And this is something that's important to me in my work and my practice. So I decided to, to set some time aside and create some of this content for those of you who are on this journey and are trying to figure some of these things out as I am. And you also mentioned the gray palette. And this is something, I'm just going to address it real quick because I think it's important. For those of you who don't know what this person's referring to, I recommend using a gray palette because you can bring values up and down, whereas, often palettes are white and everything that you mix is going to be a dark when you're mixing on a white palette. I think it makes it a little easier when you start your actual painting process. And now to the root of your question, because, the skin tones and undertones, they are a bit challenging, and everyone has their different way of attacking it. Some people start with an underpainting that's a little monotone or gray, and then layer and build some color on top of that. So you kind of have to figure out what approach you want to have. But for me, I do more direct painting, where I really like to, have all those brushworks working together and those colors next to each other. I think that really makes the painting or my work come to life. And it's something that has developed through the years. I think just 2-3 years ago, I was a much tighter painter, but I was seeking that looseness, that energy in the work. And it's something that I'm, arriving at more and more as the years go on. But it is something that's very difficult. It took me a few years to really start loosening up, and it's something that has paid off tremendously. I feel like the work has a lot more energy, not just, these portraits that I'm doing for YouTube, but also the works in my own personal practice. So if I were you, I'd probably ask myself, what do I want my painting to look like at the end, and then kind of approach it that way. Because if you are looking for something that's very smooth, very blended, then make sure that you're consuming the artist's works that have that sort of approach, whereas my approach is a little looser. I'm preserving the vibrancy of the color, and I'm not doing much blending. I'm kind of letting colors sit, and as you step away, it all works together to create this portrait. And I think, just the painters that I really admire, and those that I think make the best paintings, the most naturalistic paintings that have the most energy, they're looser artists where up close the painting could look kind of ugly and the paint could be jumbled and, a bit messy. But when you take a step back, it all makes sense. It all comes together. And something I've noticed in my work before when I used to blend is that it's easy to overblend, and then the painting can get a bit muddy. All right, so you can see how this painting has come together. One last thing before I go, you can see that the mustache area is a little more blue, then other areas are more yellow, orange, red, where you can kind of pinpoint these colors because they're so strong. And that's something that I really enjoy in my work. I just thought it was something good to point at. I would love your feedback. Let me know how you like this sort of format where I'm, answering some of your questions. If you have any questions, please write them down below. I'll address them in the future video. And if you found value in this content, please like and subscribe. It really helps out the channel. That's it for me today. See you next time.